The roar was a physical thing, not just a sound, but a pressure in my ears, a vibration in my teeth. It was the sound of 1,000 acres of dry California chaparral being devoured by a dragon of a wildfire, and it was coming right for us. The air tasted of smoke and panic. Ash, thick as gray snowflakes, drifted down, coating everything in a funereal blanket. And standing between our multi-million-dollar slice of suburban paradise and the multi-ton Caterpillar D9 bulldozer sent to save it was Carol Peterson, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, armed with a clipboard. "You will cease and desist immediately," she shrieked, her voice a reedy counterpoint to the fire's basso profundo. She had parked her golf cart, her little beige chariot of tyranny, directly in the bulldozer's path. The operator, a guy named Riggs whose face was already streaked with soot and disbelief, leaned out of his cab. "Ma'am, you're gonna want to move. Like 5 minutes ago. This is a protected native plant sanctuary and community meditation space," Carol yelled, tapping a manicured finger on her clipboard, a document I knew contained more petty bylaws than the U.S. tax code. "You are in direct violation of HOA Code of Conduct 22.7! You have no authority here." The fire crested the nearby ridge. A wave of heat, palpable and terrifying, washed over us. It was like standing in front of an open blast furnace. I could see individual trees explode into torches. This wasn't a movie. There were no stunt coordinators, no VFX team to paint out the danger later. This was the final, unedited take. Captain Miller of Cal Fire, a man who had the weary, hollowed-out look of someone who had fought too many of these wars, strode up to her. "Ma'am, I am Cal Fire. In a declared state of emergency, I have all the authority here. That fire is minutes away from crowning. Move your cart, or I will have you arrested." Carol puffed out her chest, a bantam hen facing down a tank. "I will have you fined for property damage. I am the president of this association. I will sue the state. I will sue you personally. This requires a 30-day written proposal and a majority vote from the Architectural Review Committee." Riggs in the Dozer just looked at Miller. Miller looked at the fire. I looked at Carol. The entire neighborhood, our lives, our homes, were being held hostage by a bylaw fanatic in a tennis skirt. Reason had failed. Negotiation was impossible. The system had broken down. And that's when my old life kicked in. I've directed 14 feature films. I've wrangled armies of extras, dealt with petulant A-list actors having meltdowns over the size of their trailers, and stared down studio executives threatening to replace me with a fresh-faced kid from Sundance. I know a thing or two about immovable objects, and I know that when reason fails, you don't argue. You change the entire equation. I pulled out my phone. Miller gave me a sideways glance. "Calling 911 isn't going to get here fast enough, buddy." "Don't worry," I said, scrolling through my contacts to a name I hadn't needed in 2 years. "I'm not calling the cops. I'm calling transportation." As I dialed the number that would solve one life-threatening problem by creating a dozen smaller, more hilarious ones, I couldn't help but wonder how my quiet retirement had turned into the climax of a bad disaster movie. Oh, right. It started, as most disasters do, with the HOA. 2 years ago, I had officially retired from Hollywood. The final straw was a film called Geostorm: Retribution. My star, a muscle-bound action hero whose charisma was inversely proportional to his IQ, refused to come out of his trailer because the Evian water provided was, in his words, too dry. We were in the middle of the Mojave Desert. After calmly explaining the fundamental properties of water to a man who made millions pretending to be a physicist, I finished the shoot, collected my paycheck, and bought a house in the most aggressively peaceful-looking place I could find, Whispering Pines Estates. It was sold to me as an idyllic enclave nestled in the California hills. What they failed to mention was that it was an idyllic enclave governed by a pocket dictator whose chosen weapon was a 3-ring binder. I met Carol Peterson on my 3rd day. I was on my deck, enjoying a coffee and trying to explain to my former agent, Marty, that I was no longer his client. "Marty, I'm out," I said, watching a hummingbird buzz a feeder. "The 3rd act of my career is weak. The character motivation is thin, and frankly, my emotional investment is at crafty services getting a stale donut. Find someone else to direct Sharknado vs. Volcano 3, The Meltdown." "But Jack, the studio loves you," Marty wailed. "They said your ability to manage chaos is legendary." "That's because I'm dead inside, Marty. Utterly, completely." My Zen moment was shattered by the sight of a woman marching up my newly laid flagstone path. She wore a visor, a pristine white tennis skirt, and a look of profound disappointment that most people reserve for finding a fly in their soup. She was holding a clipboard. "Mr. Sterling," she announced, without introduction, "a formal notice." "Let me guess," I said into the phone to Marty. "You sent a script." I covered the receiver. "Can I help you?" "I am Carol Peterson, president of the Homeowners Association," she said, as if announcing her divine right to rule. "And I'm here about your bougainvillea." I looked at the magnificent explosion of magenta flowers climbing a trellis. "Is it performing poorly? I can give it some notes. Maybe a little more pop in its color palette?" Her lips thinned into a bloodless line. "It is encroaching 1.75 inches over the designated property line hedge. That's a violation of Bylaw 14, Section C, subsection flowering overgrowth. You have 48 hours to rectify." I stared at her. I once had a $10 million pyrotechnic sequence ruined because a seagull flew through the shot. I've wrangled 10,000 screaming extras in the Moroccan desert. I've convinced the Pentagon to let me land a helicopter on an active aircraft carrier. But this woman was a one-take problem. "I'll get right on that," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Marty," I said back into the phone, "I've got to go. I'm dealing with a hostile executive." That was my introduction to Carol's regime. Over the next 2 years, I collected a series of increasingly absurd violation notices. My garden gnome, Sparky, was 2 inches taller than the bylaw allowed. My welcome mat was deemed to have excessive thematic whimsy. The solar panels on my roof, while permitted, apparently cast a non-compliant reflection between the hours of 3 and 4 p.m. Each notice was a little battle in a cold war of suburban ennui. The real trouble, of course, began with the change in weather. The Santa Ana winds started to blow, hot and dry, rattling the windows and carrying the scent of distant trouble. The local news was filled with talk of red flag warnings and extreme fire danger. It was a familiar prologue to any California disaster story. Carol, naturally, called an emergency HOA meeting at the community clubhouse, a building decorated in 50 shades of beige. The main agenda item was a 45-minute debate, complete with PowerPoint slides, on whether to approve a new shade of taupe for exterior window trim. The choice was between desert sand and Sonoran tan. I sat in the back, watching a muted TV in the corner showing a brush fire that had started a few canyons over. No one else seemed to notice. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. "Carol, with all due respect to the profound philosophical differences between desert sand and Sonoran tan, maybe we should talk about the giant tinderbox we all live in. The red flag warnings are up, and there's a fire burning 20 miles from here." Carol fixed me with a withering stare. "That is not on the approved agenda, Mr. Sterling. We have a process here. Your pre-submitted motion to discuss non-aesthetic emergencies was, as you know, rejected for improper formatting." A man in the front row, a retired actuary named Bill, nodded sagely. "She's right, Jack. The formatting was a mess. You used Times New Roman. The bylaws clearly state all submissions must be in Garamond 12-point font. I left. I went home and spent the entire weekend clearing brush around my property, creating a defensible space that far exceeded the HOA's pathetic guidelines. My neighbors watched me, some with curiosity, others with the kind of pity they reserve for the local eccentric. 24 hours later, the sky turned orange. The reverse 911 calls started first, a robotic voice issuing an evacuation warning. Then came the ash. My disaster movie instincts, honed over decades of meticulous pre-production, kicked in. I moved with a calm efficiency that felt alien in the rising panic of the neighborhood. Go bags were packed. Important documents were in a fireproof safe in my car. I was hosing down my roof when I got a frantic call from my neighbor, an elderly man named George. He was panicking. I shifted into director mode. "George, listen to me. Breathe. I'm the director. You're my lead actor. Your motivation is to get out safely. Forget the photo albums. Grab your wife, grab the meds. That's it. Got it? Take Canyon Road, not the main boulevard. It'll be a bottleneck. Go. Action." He calmed down instantly. Sometimes people just need to be told what to do. As I was about to pull out of my driveway, my phone pinged with an email. The subject line read, "Urgent. Emergency HOA Wildfire Response Meeting." My first thought was, good. Maybe she's finally come to her senses. Then I saw the next line. Via Zoom. Morbid curiosity is a powerful force. I parked at the end of my street, the ominous glow of the fire visible over the hills, and I logged on. There was Carol, perfectly coiffed, sitting in front of a virtual background of a serene Hawaiian beach. "A reminder to all residents," she began, as if discussing a bake sale. "Per the CC&Rs, please ensure your garbage and recycling bins are returned to their designated storage areas before you evacuate. We don't want the neighborhood looking untidy for the first responders." I stared at my phone, my jaw slack. "Also," she continued, "any temporary fire retardant measures, such as unsightly sprinklers on roofs or foam coatings, must be submitted for architectural review upon your return. Fines will be issued for non-compliance." I logged off. My last shred of faith in organized community governance had just been vaporized. I decided to drive down to the main road, to the staging area where the professionals were gathering. I needed to see the real world again. The entrance to Whispering Pines was a controlled chaos of fire engines, crew trucks, and the organized ballet of men and women who actually knew what they were doing. I found the incident commander, Captain Miller. He was all grizzled competence and exhaustion, staring at a map laid out on the hood of his truck. I walked up. "What's the play, Captain?" He looked up, surprised by my directness. "Who are you?" "Jack Sterling. I live up there," I said, pointing toward my house. "Directed a few disaster flicks. I know a little about fuel loads and wind vectors." He raised an eyebrow, but seemed to appreciate that I wasn't screaming or crying. He pointed a dirt-caked finger at the map. "Wind is shifting. It's going to push the head of the fire right down this canyon. It'll hit that ridge in under an hour. The only thing that'll stop it from sweeping through this whole development is a hard line. We need to cut a fire break right along that greenbelt at the top of the ridge." "The HOA greenbelt," I said, a cold dread seeping into my stomach. "The native plant sanctuary and community meditation space." "That's the one," Miller said, oblivious. "It's public safety. We have the authority. They usually get it." "Usually," I repeated quietly. "You haven't met the dragon that guards it, have you?" He just shrugged and keyed his radio, ordering the Dozer team to move up. I had a terrible sinking feeling. I knew Carol's belief in her own authority was stronger than any mere state of emergency. I got in my car and followed the lowboy trailer carrying the massive bulldozer. I told myself I was just going to run interference. And that brought me right back here, phone to my ear, with the fate of Whispering Pines hanging on my connection to a guy named Vince, who once hot-wired a Panavision camera crane in the middle of a sandstorm using nothing but a Leatherman and sheer force of will. The phone clicked. Yeah. Vince's voice was gravelly, permanently coated in a layer of road dust and cheap coffee. Vince, it's Jack Sterling, I said, turning my back to the argument, my voice calm and low. I have an impromptu shoot, an unscheduled scene. Boss? I thought you were retired, he grunted. The muse is a fickle beast, my friend. Listen, I have an immovable object blocking a key piece of heavy equipment. I need a problem-solver team. The heavy lifters. There was a pause. I could hear the clink of a wrench in the background. Hostile talent? Vince asked. It was our code for an actor being an ass. Worse, I said, glancing at Carol, who was now shaking her clipboard at Captain Miller. An HOA president. Vince whistled, a low, impressed sound. Oof, that's above my pay grade, boss. I'll double it. Location is my place, Whispering Pines. The Greenbelt entrance. The asset is a middle-aged woman in a golf cart. I need them handled. Handled how? Delicate extraction, I said, slipping back into the language of the set. The objective is distraction and removal of obstruction. No contact with the asset. She's not the talent, she's a set deck problem. You're just the art department clearing the frame. I could practically hear the grin in his voice. Consider it handled. I've got a rigging crew finishing a wrap on a car commercial just down in Burbank. They're bored. They love a good challenge. ETA 3 minutes. Perfect. Tell them it's a delicate extraction. And Vince, tell them to bring the big truck. I hung up and walked back over to Captain Miller, who looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Give me 3 minutes, Captain, I said calmly. My people will handle this. He stared at me like I'd just sprouted a second head. Your people? You have your crew, I said. I have mine. 2 minutes and 45 seconds later, we heard it. A low rumble that was different from the fire's roar. It grew into the sound of a diesel engine that had gargled rocks for breakfast. A huge, blacked-out Ford F-450 crew cab truck, the kind used for towing massive movie trailers, roared up the hill and screeched to a halt. It was lifted, studded with LED lights and winches, and looked like it belonged on the set of Mad Max. The doors opened and 4 men hopped out. They were huge, dressed in black work shirts with a small logo, VMAC Translogistics, embroidered on the chest. They didn't speak. They moved with the quiet, intimidating efficiency of a team that had dismantled and moved entire worlds overnight. Their leader, a man with a shaved head and a neck as thick as my thigh, walked over to me. He ignored Carol, Miller, the fire, everything. Sarge, he grunted, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush coconuts. Vince sent us. Said you had a set deck issue? I pointed. The golf cart is blocking the shot, and that patio set over there is a visual distraction. I indicated Carol's prized wrought iron table and chairs, which she had defiantly placed in her yard right on the edge of the greenbelt. Sarge nodded once. He didn't need any more direction. He turned to his crew. Okay, boys. Looks like a standard set deck obstruction. Priority 1 is the golf cart. Priority 2 is the patio furniture. Wrap and tag 'em. Let's go, people, we're losing the light. Carol, who had been momentarily stunned into silence by their arrival, found her voice. What do you think you're doing? This is private property. Sarge held up a hand and gave her a placating, professional smile. Ma'am, we're with the production. We're just clearing some items that are in the way. Standard procedure. Before she could process that, 2 of his men descended on her patio set. With a speed and precision that was almost beautiful, they began wrapping each chair and the table in thick, padded, moving blankets, securing them with straps. A third man calmly attached a soft strap with a winch hook to the golf cart's axle. My patio set? Carol stammered, utterly baffled. Production? What production? Ma'am, Sarge said, his voice a soothing baritone, as if explaining things to a confused child. Per the emergency directive from the director, we're securing all loose assets in the immediate vicinity. We'll store these for you in our secure facility. You'll get a receipt and a full inventory sheet, of course. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the situation broke her brain. Her focus, which had been laser-sharp on the bulldozer, now shifted entirely to the professional, organized theft of her outdoor dining furniture. The existential threat of the wildfire was abstract. The violation of her personal property was immediate and deeply personal. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, lunging toward one of the men wrapping a chair. "That's a Martha Stewart original!" While her attention was diverted, Sarge gave Riggs in the bulldozer a subtle "go" hand signal. Riggs didn't hesitate. He fired up the blade, punched the throttle, and the giant machine roared to life. It rumbled past the spot where the golf cart had been moments before and began to carve a deep, wide scar of salvation into the earth of the community meditation space. Captain Miller just stared. He looked at the fire, then at the VMAC crew efficiently winching Carol's golf cart onto their flatbed, then at me. A slow grin spread across his smoke-stained face. He just shook his head and keyed his radio. "Command, this is Miller. Be advised, the Dozer line is in progress." 20 minutes later, the Dozer line was a wide, ugly, beautiful trench of bare dirt. The fire was close, a wall of incandescent rage, but the line was holding. The VMAC crew was just finishing securing Carol's patio set when a sheriff's patrol car, lights flashing, finally arrived. A deputy stepped out, looking weary. Carol, her face a mask of tear-streaked indignation, ran to him. "Officer, thank God! Arrest these men! They're thieves! And he—" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's their leader! They stole my furniture!" The deputy sighed the sigh of a man who sees too much weirdness before his first coffee break. He walked over to me. "Sir, can you explain what's going on here?" I gave him my most reasonable, non-Hollywood smile. "Certainly, officer. Captain Miller here of CAL FIRE." I gestured to Miller, who nodded grimly. Needed to get a bulldozer through to save the neighborhood. This woman was physically obstructing emergency personnel during a mandatory evacuation order. My associates are logistics experts. They merely relocated her personal property, which was also in the immediate danger zone, to a secure location to de-escalate the situation and remove the obstruction. No one was touched. Obstruction cleared. Lives being saved. Here's their business card. I handed the deputy a sleek black card from Sarge that read, "VMAC Translogistics. We move worlds." Miller stepped forward. "He's right, deputy. She was stopping us from doing our job. His guys cleared the way. Frankly, I don't care how he did it. He probably just saved all these houses." The deputy looked from the roaring fire to the absurdly professional crew to the hysterical woman screaming about her wicker. He made a field decision. He turned back to Carol. "Ma'am, you are in a mandatory evacuation zone. You have been ordered to leave multiple times. Get in your car and drive down this hill right now, or you will be arrested for obstructing a firefighter. Worry about your damn patio set later." Defeated, deflated, and robbed of all authority, Carol sputtered, shot me a look of pure hatred, and finally stomped away. We stood there for a long time, Miller and I, watching the helicopters drop payloads of pink retardant and the hand crews making their stand at the line Riggs had cut. The fire threw everything it had at that line, a furious assault of embers and flame, and the line held. It was terrifying. It was awesome. It was like watching the best special effect I'd ever seen, only it was real. A week later, the air was still hazy, but the smoke was gone. Whispering Pines was still standing, singed around the edges like a piece of burnt toast, but intact. The hillsides were a blackened moonscape, but our homes were safe. A special HOA meeting was called in the clubhouse. The story of Carol's last stand had become the stuff of legend. She didn't even show up. She was voted out as president in a unanimous decision that took approximately 12 seconds. Then, Bill, the actuary, stood up. "I nominate Jack Sterling for president," he said. The room erupted in applause. I held up my hands. Whoa, thank you, but I respectfully decline. My agent would kill me. I will, however, accept the newly created, entirely unofficial and unpaid position of Director of Emergency Preparedness. The room laughed. A new, more reasonable president was elected, a retired schoolteacher who seemed nice. Later that evening, I was on my deck. The sunset was painting the blackened hills in shades of purple and orange. I was on the phone with Vince. "Vince, the check is in the mail," I said. "Tell Sarge and the boys I appreciate the professional courtesy. They gave a great performance." "Any time, boss," he chuckled. Sarge said it was the weirdest gig he's ever done. He sent the lady a bill for the storage of one golf cart and one slightly singed patio set. Don't think she's gonna pay it. "Probably not," I said, smiling. "You ever get the itch to come back to the business? Let me know." "Nah, I think I found my new production, Vince. The budget is terrible and the lead actress is a nightmare, but the stakes are real." We said our goodbyes. I took a sip of my scotch, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had faced the beast, both the fire and the HOA, and won. I had found my quiet life. I walked down to my mailbox to grab the mail. Tucked between a Pottery Barn catalog and a letter from my accountant was a crisp, official-looking envelope from the Whispering Pines HOA. I opened it. It was a violation notice. Violation: illegal parking of a commercial vehicle, Ford F450, in a residential area on the date of the fire. It was signed by the new HOA president. I looked at the piece of paper, then up at the scarred but safe hillsides surrounding my home. And I started to laugh. The cycle would continue. The absurdity was eternal. But now at least I knew exactly who to call.